Ancient civilizations built empires on waterlogged lands. We are uncovering the stories of 35 societies that turned isolation into immense power. This journey reveals how islands became launching pads for incredible innovation and enduring mysteries. You will discover the hidden connections between cultures separated by vast oceans. How did a people on a remote Pacific island move statues weighing 80 tons? What secret lies within the undeciphered script of Europe's first advanced civilization? By the end, you will see the ancient world through an entirely new lens. What forgotten island story do you hope we uncover first? A civilization of unparalleled sophistication emerged on the sun-drenched island of Crete over 4,000 years ago. The Minoans did not just live on their island, they mastered it, creating Europe's first advanced society. Their power was centered around vast, sprawling palace complexes that were far more than royal homes. The greatest of these was Knossos, a structure so immense and complex with its maze of corridors and rooms that it inspired the later Greek legend of the Minotaur and its labyrinth. Imagine walking through those vibrant, painted hallways, surrounded by stunning frescoes depicting young men and women gracefully leaping over charging bulls. This was not mere decoration, it was a window into a culture that celebrated athleticism, nature, and a deep connection to the divine. But the Minoan genius extended far beyond art and architecture. Beneath their feet lay one of the ancient world's most remarkable achievements, an advanced plumbing and sanitation network. They had terracotta pipes for fresh water and drainage, and even flush toilets, comforts that would not become common again for thousands of years. This was a society that valued cleanliness, comfort, and engineering. Their economic and administrative life was recorded in a unique script known as Linear A. While we can see its symbols clearly on clay tablets, their meaning remains one of history's most tantalizing secrets, a locked door to the Minoan mind. Ultimately, their island was not a prison but a springboard. The Minoans were the ancient world's great seafarers, building a powerful thalassocracy, a vast empire held together by ships and trade rather than land armies. Their vessels crisscrossed the Aegean Sea, creating a network of influence that connected cultures and brought immense wealth to Crete. They turned the surrounding sea into their domain, proving that an island could be the very heart of a civilization. So what happened to this brilliant, vibrant society? Their mysterious decline opens the door to our next island story, one of fire, ash, and a cataclysm that reshaped the ancient world. Long before the grandeur of Knossos, the scattered islands of the Aegean Sea cradled a different kind of genius. The Cycladic culture emerged from these rocky shores, a society that thrived for over 1,000 years, starting around 3,200 years before the Common Era. Their legacy is written not in sprawling palaces or undeciphered scripts, but in stark, beautiful marble. They are most famous for their enigmatic figurines, sleek and minimalist sculptures that feel astonishingly modern. Most depict female forms abstracted into elegant shapes with crossed arms, a pointed nose, and a smooth, featureless face. Were they goddesses, ancestral spirits, or grave offerings? Their true purpose remains one of archaeology's quiet debates, yet their power is undeniable. These forms would go on to captivate artists like Picasso millennia later, proving that their artistic vision was truly timeless. But the Cycladic people were more than just sculptors. Their settlements, though simpler than the later Minoan palaces, show a sophisticated understanding of community and trade. They mastered the resources of their islands, particularly the volcanic glass known as obsidian. This material, sharper than steel, was a precious commodity in the ancient world, and the Cycladic island of Milos became the heart of a vast trade network. Their boats carried this valuable tool-making material across the Aegean, connecting islands and mainland in a web of commerce that spread their influence far and wide. This hints at a society of skilled sailors and shrewd merchants, not just solitary artists. Yet the deepest mystery of this culture lies broken on the shores of Kiros. Here, archaeologists discovered not a settlement, but a ritual site of staggering scale known as the Kiros Hoard. It contained thousands of these beautiful marble figurines, along with marble bowls and other objects, almost all of them deliberately shattered. Why was this remote island a destination for broken treasures? It suggests Kiros was a major ceremonial center, a place where pilgrims would bring these items, perhaps as offerings, to be ritually broken and left behind. This was not a culture of simple farmers, but one with a complex spiritual life centered on the sea. Their story raises a profound question: how does a civilization leave such a powerful mark, yet keep its deepest secret so well hidden? The Minoan flame did not simply flicker and die, it was absorbed by a new and formidable power. From the mainland of Greece rose the Mycenaeans, a warrior culture whose influence reached across the sea to dominate the very islands the Minoans once ruled. After the fall of Knossos, they moved onto Crete, occupying and fortifying the old Minoan palaces. They built colossal citadels with walls so massive later generations would believe they were constructed by giants, the Cyclopes. These were not centers of graceful bull leaping, but heavily defended seats of power designed for control and defense. Their presence reshaped the political map of the entire Aegean. On the strategically vital island of Rhodes, they established another key stronghold, turning this sun-drenched island into a crucial node in their vast commercial network. They were the new masters of the sea lanes, and their reach was extensive. We know the intimate details of their administration, down to the number of chariot wheels in their storerooms, because of the clay tablets they left behind. The Mycenaeans used a script we call Linear B, which was ultimately deciphered in the 1950s. It revealed something monumental. This was an early form of the Greek language. For the first time, we could hear the voices of this Bronze Age civilization, not in poetry, but in bureaucratic lists of goods, personnel, and offerings to the gods. This evidence grounds their legendary status in historical fact. These were the people Homer would immortalize centuries later in his epic poems, the kings and warriors who supposedly fought the decade-long Trojan War. While the war itself lives in the realm of legend, the world Homer described, one of powerful kings in fortified palaces, of bronze weapons and long-distance trade, was unmistakably the Mycenaean world. They created a unified cultural and economic sphere, a network of palatial centers that extracted wealth from the land and sea. Then, around 1100 before the Common Era, it all came crashing down. Their palaces were burned and abandoned, their writing vanished, and their trade routes collapsed. The causes are still debated, from internal unrest to foreign invasions or widespread drought, but the result was a catastrophic systems collapse that plunged Greece into a centuries-long dark age. The light of their civilization was extinguished, leaving behind only ruins and echoes in epic poetry. What could cause such a widespread and advanced network to simply disintegrate? The answer may lie not on the mainland, but far to the east, on an island whose people mastered the sea in an entirely different way. While the Mycenaean world crumbled into a dark age, another civilization was already harnessing the sea to build a different kind of empire, one woven from trade routes rather than conquest. The Phoenicians were the master networkers of the ancient world, and their story is inextricably linked to islands. They did not seek to rule vast territories from a single capital, but to establish a chain of trading posts and colonies that turned the entire Mediterranean into their marketplace. The island of Cyprus was one of their most crucial hubs, a strategic prize rich with copper, the very metal that gave the Bronze Age its name. Here, they built the powerful city kingdom of Kishon, a thriving industrial and religious center. But their influence was not merely economic, it was cultural and technological. Their greatest gift to the world was not a product, but a tool for thought, the first widely used alphabet. This revolutionary system replaced the complex syllabic scripts of older empires with a set of just over 20 simple symbols, each representing a single consonant sound. It was a democratization of writing, making it easier to learn and use for commerce and record-keeping. This Phoenician alphabet would be adopted and adapted by the Greeks, who added vowels, and it eventually became the foundation for the Latin script that you are reading right now. Their economic power was built on luxury. They became famous for a color, a deep, rich purple dye painstakingly extracted from the murex snail. It took thousands of these shellfish to produce a single gram of the dye, making purple cloth worth more than its weight in gold and a symbol of royalty for millennia. They also traded in magnificent cedar wood from their homeland, in exquisite glassware, and in metals sourced from across their network. Their religious life centered on powerful deities like Baal, a storm and fertility god, and Astarte, a goddess of love, war, and fertility, whose worship was central to cities like Kishan. Their colonies, from Cyprus to Carthage in North Africa, were not isolated outposts but vital way stations in a web that stretched from the Levant all the way to the Atlantic coast of Spain. They were the indispensable middlemen, the connectors who facilitated the flow of ideas, goods, and technologies between the great powers of the East and the emerging cultures of the West. So what happens when a society so dedicated to commerce and connection faces an existential threat from a new, land-based empire? The answer lies in the story of a people who turned their island home into an unconquerable fortress. Long before the Phoenicians established their trading posts, the island of Cyprus itself pulsed with its own powerful and ancient heart. The story of its native civilization is written in copper, a metal so central to its identity that the island's very name is derived from the word for it. From the Bronze Age onward, Cyprus was the copper capital of the ancient world, supplying the essential ingredient for the tools, weapons, and ornaments of empires. This immense wealth fueled the rise of powerful, independent cities. One of the greatest was in Komi, a bustling metropolis on the eastern coast. This was no simple mining town, but a sophisticated urban center with paved streets, impressive public buildings, and sprawling workshops where raw copper ore was smelted into gleaming ingots. These ingots, shaped like stretched ox hides for easy transport, became a standard currency of international trade, found in shipwrecks and treasuries across the Mediterranean. The people of Nkomi were not just miners and metal workers, they were administrators and merchants who developed their own system of record-keeping. We know this from the clay tablets they left behind, inscribed with a script scholars call Minoan. It appears to be an adaptation of the Minoan Linear A, tailored for their own unknown language, and its secrets remain locked away, a silent testament to their intellectual sophistication. Their artistic spirit flourished beyond the forge. Cypriot potters created stunning vessels, from graceful base ringware with its elegant, metallic shapes to intricate pottery decorated with scenes of daily life and spiritual belief. Central to that belief was the worship of a female divinity, a great goddess often depicted with upraised arms, symbolizing fertility, nature, and protection. She was a powerful, nurturing figure who likely evolved over centuries into the Greek goddess Aphrodite, who, according to some myths, was born from the sea foam near Cyprus. This combination of immense mineral wealth and strategic location made the island a prize that no expanding empire could ignore. The Hittites from Anatolia claimed it as a vassal state, the pharaohs of Egypt sought its resources, and the Mycenaean Greeks established their own strongholds there. The ancient Cypriots navigated this world of superpowers, their culture absorbing influences from all sides while fiercely maintaining its own unique identity. They were the original masters of their island's destiny, a prosperous and resilient civilization whose story was forged in fire and metal. How does a society maintain its soul when it sits at the crossroads of the world, coveted by everyone? Far to the west, on the rugged island of Sardinia, a civilization built its identity in stone. The Nuragic people began their story around 1800 years before the Common Era, and for over 1,500 years they shaped their island home into a landscape of profound mystery. Their legacy is the Nyoraghi, thousands of unique conical stone towers that rise from the Sardinian earth like silent sentinels. Built without mortar from massive basalt blocks, these structures are feats of Bronze Age engineering. Were they defensive strongholds, noble residences, religious centers, or all of these at once? Each theory offers a different window into this society. A single tower might have been a family's home and fortress, while the great Nyoraghi complexes, with multiple towers connected by massive walls, suggest the seats of powerful chieftains controlling trade routes and farmland. The sheer number of these towers, over 7,000, tells us this was not a collection of scattered villages, but a complex, organized, and likely competitive society spread across the entire island. But their spiritual world was built not only upward but also downward. They constructed sacred well temples, intricate subterranean structures designed to honor the life-giving power of water. A staircase would descend deep into the earth, leading to a perfectly crafted tholos or beehive-shaped vault covering a pristine pool of groundwater. The precision of the stonework here is breathtaking, and the acoustics within the chamber are often remarkable, suggesting rituals where sound and water intertwined. This was a culture that revered the essential elements, seeing divinity in the springs that sustained them. Their mastery extended from stone to metal. The Nyoraghic people were brilliant bronze workers, crafting everything from practical tools and powerful weapons to exquisite figurines. These small bronze statues offer us a vivid glimpse into their daily life and beliefs. We see warriors with shields and bows, chieftains holding staffs of authority, and mothers with children. We see intricate models of Nyoraghi themselves and haunting representations of animals and mysterious box-like structures. Then there is the sudden, monumental emergence of their art in stone. Centuries after the first Nyoraghi were built, they carved the giants of Mont Proma, a collection of towering sandstone statues standing over 2 meters tall. These are not the graceful figures of the Greeks, but powerful, geometric forms with stark, mask-like faces and deeply carved eyes. They hold shields or bows, and some wear a horned helmet, marking them as warriors or heroes. They are the earliest known colossal statues found anywhere in the Mediterranean, a stunning and unexpected display of power and identity. For centuries, the Nyoraghic civilization thrived in relative isolation, their unique culture evolving on its own terms. They traded with other Mediterranean powers, as evidenced by foreign artifacts found on the island, but they absorbed these influences without losing their core identity. It was only with the escalating colonial ambitions of the Carthaginians, and later the relentless expansion of the Roman Republic, that this resilient, island-bound culture was finally and forcibly drawn into a wider world. What does it mean for a people to build so distinctively for so long, only to have their voice fade from history? The echoes of their stone towers lead us to another island where a different society faced the open ocean with even greater ambition. The Talaiotic people built a world in stone on the islands of Minorca and Mallorca. For over 1,000 years, they shaped their landscape into something both practical and profound. Their name comes from their most iconic structure, the Talaiot. These are massive, round or square towers built without mortar from enormous stone blocks. From a distance, they look like great stone beehives dotting the hills. Each one was a focal point for the community, a place that could serve as a watchtower to spot approaching ships, a secure dwelling for a leading family, or a central gathering space for social and economic life. The sheer effort required to build them speaks of a highly organized society capable of mobilizing its people for grand communal projects. But the Talaiots are only one piece of the puzzle. Within special enclosures, they constructed the mysterious taulas. These are unique T-shaped monuments formed by a massive central stone with a perfectly balanced capstone, creating a form that resembles a giant table, which is what taula means. These were not built for daily life but for ceremony. Found within walled sanctuaries, they were the spiritual heart of Talaiotic society, places where the community likely gathered for rituals that connected them to their gods and ancestors. The purpose of these imposing structures remains a subject of intense debate, but their careful orientation and placement suggest a deep celestial knowledge. For their dead, they built navatas. These are collective tombs, also of dry stone, shaped like an upside-down boat. This distinct form hints at a culture intimately connected to the sea, even in death. Inside, the remains of dozens, sometimes over 100 individuals, were carefully placed alongside grave goods, suggesting a belief in a community that endured beyond the grave. This connection to stone and sea forged a people of remarkable martial skill. The Talaiotic warriors became legendary throughout the Mediterranean as master slingers. They trained from childhood to use the simple sling with devastating accuracy and force. In battle, their lead or stone projectiles could pierce armor and break shields long before an enemy could get close with a sword. Their reputation was so formidable that they were sought after as elite mercenaries, fighting in the armies of both Carthage and Rome. They turned their island isolation into a source of power, exporting their unique skills to the wider world in exchange for wealth and prestige. Walking among these megalithic structures today, the landscape feels ancient and otherworldly. It is a testament to a society that carved its identity directly into the bedrock of its islands, creating a civilization that was both fiercely local and surprisingly connected. What drove them to build on such a monumental scale, and what secrets do their silent stone tables still hold? The Carthaginian Empire wove its influence directly into the fabric of the Mediterranean's greatest islands. From their North African capital, they looked to Sicily and Sardinia not as distant outposts but as vital centers of power and wealth. On the western coast of Sicily, they built the formidable city of Motia, a place of such strategic importance it was situated on its own small island, protected by formidable walls and connected to the mainland only by a narrow causeway. In Sardinia, their key stronghold was Carolles, a bustling port that is today the modern city of Cagliari. These were not mere trading posts, they were fortified hubs of Carthaginian military, economic, and cultural power, projecting control over the surrounding seas and land. Their presence on Sicily inevitably set them on a collision course with another expanding power, the Greek colonists who had settled the eastern part of the island. For centuries, the Sicilian Wars raged between Carthage and rival Greek city-states like Syracuse and Acrogas. This was a clash of titans, a brutal struggle for dominance over the richest island in the Mediterranean, fought with massive armies and vast fleets. The Carthaginians were masters of naval warfare and siegecraft, but they faced equally brilliant Greek generals and engineers. This epic rivalry was a preview of an even greater conflict to come. To support their ambitions, the Carthaginians engineered some of the ancient world's most advanced harbors. The circular, fortified naval base at Carthage itself was a marvel, capable of sheltering hundreds of warships in a secure, inland complex completely hidden from view. This engineering genius extended to their island ports, ensuring their fleets could dominate sea lanes and project power across vast distances. Yet, the most haunting and debated aspect of their culture involves their religious practices. At sacred precincts known as tophets, archaeologists have uncovered the cremated remains of thousands of young children and animals, buried in urns beneath stone markers. Ancient sources and some modern interpretations suggest this was a form of child sacrifice, an offering to the gods Baal-Hamon and Tanit in times of extreme crisis. Other scholars argue these were sanctified burials for children who died naturally. The emotional weight of this evidence remains a profound and unsettling mystery, challenging our understanding of their society's deepest beliefs. Ultimately, the struggle for Sicily would draw in a new power from the Italian mainland, Rome. The contest for this single island ignited the Punic Wars, a series of 3 devastating conflicts that would decide the fate of the Western world. The Carthaginian general Hannibal would become a legend for marching his army and war elephants across the Alps to threaten Rome itself, but in the end, the Roman legions proved unstoppable. They systematically dismantled the Carthaginian Empire, seizing Sicily and Sardinia, and finally, in 146 years before the Common Era, they utterly destroyed the city of Carthage itself, sowing its fields with salt so nothing would ever grow there again. The fall of Carthage opened the sea to a new, unchallenged master, but the memory of their power and their terrifying rituals lingered for centuries. How does a civilization so powerful, so ingenious in its engineering, and so vast in its influence simply vanish from the earth, leaving behind only echoes and ashes? Even as Carthaginian power cast its long shadow, the eastern shores of Sicily were ablaze with a different kind of light. The Greek colonies of Sicily and southern Italy, a region so rich and influential it was called Magna Graecia or Greater Greece, created a cultural sphere that rivaled the homeland itself. Their cities were not mere outposts but magnificent centers of power, art, and thought. Syracuse grew to be one of the largest and most splendid cities in the entire Greek world, its population and wealth challenging even Athens at its peak. Its natural harbors and formidable fortifications made it a naval powerhouse, while its tyrants, men like Dionysius the Elder, built a war machine that dominated the central Mediterranean. Further west, the city of Acrogas, known today as Agrigento, displayed its piety and prosperity in stone. Its famous Valley of the Temples is a breathtaking testament to this golden age, with a row of colossal Doric temples built on a ridge overlooking the sea. The sheer scale of the Temple of Olympian Zeus, though never completed, was intended to be one of the largest Greek temples ever conceived, a bold declaration of civic pride. This was a society that produced geniuses as well as generals. The great mathematician and inventor Archimedes was a son of Syracuse. It was here he supposedly discovered his principle of buoyancy while in a bath, shouting, "Eureka!" He designed devastating war machines, including legendary claw devices that could lift enemy ships from the water to defend his city from Roman siege. The poet Stesichorus, also from this region, composed influential lyric poetry that helped shape the myths of heroes like Helen of Troy. Their contributions extended to philosophy, politics, and science, proving that the intellectual fervor of Greece burned just as brightly in the West. The heart of public life beat in their magnificent open-air theaters. The one at Syracuse, carved into the rocky hillside, is one of the largest ever built by the Greeks, a space where tens of thousands gathered for plays, political assemblies, and civic rituals. These colonies were fierce competitors, both with each other and with their Carthaginian neighbors, in a constant, violent dance of alliance and betrayal. They exported their unique forms of government, including experiments in democracy, and their hoplite warfare to the Italian peninsula, profoundly influencing the emerging culture of Rome itself. They lived in a world of brilliant sunlight and deep shadows, caught between the allure of their own Hellenic culture and the constant threat from the sea. How does a civilization so radiant, so confident in its own genius, find itself ultimately overshadowed by the very cultures it helped to shape? Long before Rome was a whisper on the Tiber, the Etruscans held sway over the heart of Italy and the sea lanes beyond. Their gaze fell upon the volcanic Aeolian Islands, where the fires of the earth created a resource more valuable than gold to the ancient world, obsidian. The island of Lipari became the epicenter of this black, glass-like treasure. This was not a casual trade, it was an industry controlled with precision. The Etruscans understood that this material, which could be flaked into edges sharper than any metal, was the key to their economic and political influence. They managed the quarries and the distribution, sending their ships across the central Mediterranean laden with the volcanic glass that was essential for tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects. This control over a critical resource funneled immense wealth into their mainland cities, powering their rise. Their culture reflected this prosperity and sophistication. Etruscan art bursts with life and motion, from the vibrant frescoes in their tombs depicting banquets and dancers to exquisite gold jewelry worked with a technique that still astonishes. Their religion was deeply rooted in the practice of divination, the belief that one could read the will of the gods in the flight of birds or the markings on a sheep's liver. This was a people intensely concerned with the afterlife, building entire cities of the dead, necropolises that mirrored the world of the living. Yet, for all their cultural brilliance, their voice remains tantalizingly half-heard. The Etruscan language is a profound enigma. It does not belong to the vast Indo-European family that includes Greek, Latin, and most modern European languages. We can read their letters clearly as they adapted the Greek alphabet, but the meaning of their words largely escapes us. Thousands of inscriptions survive, yet they are mostly short funerary dedications, leaving their literature, their history, and their own stories locked in silence. This linguistic isolation makes them unique, a distinct thread in the tapestry of the ancient Mediterranean. They were the essential cultural conduit, absorbing artistic styles, myths, and technologies from their Greek trading partners and neighbors to the south, and then passing them on to the villages of Latium, including a budding settlement called Rome. The early Romans were deeply influenced by their powerful Etruscan neighbors, adopting everything from their engineering techniques for building temples and draining marshes to the symbols of political authority, the fasces, and even the very practice of divination. The Etruscans, masters of the volcanic islands and the seas around them, essentially schooled the civilization that would one day surpass them. How does a culture so influential, so central to the birth of a future empire, become a historical echo? Its own story told only through the artifacts it left behind and the civilization it helped to create. Rome's legions did not just conquer islands, they remade them in the empire's own image. Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, and Cyprus were not merely territories to be controlled, but vital organs in the body of a sprawling state. The transformation began with the earth itself. Sicily was so crucial to the empire's food supply it earned the title breadbasket of Rome. Its fertile plains were given over almost entirely to vast grain plantations, worked by enslaved people on an industrial scale. Each year, a massive fleet of ships, the Annona, carried this essential harvest to the teeming populace of the capital, a logistical feat that kept the city of Rome alive and stable. To bind these islands to the mainland, the Romans wove them into a web of stone and water. They constructed robust networks of roads that connected new colonial towns, allowing legions to march and goods to flow with unprecedented speed. Magnificent aqueducts marching on their towering arches across the landscape brought fresh water to burgeoning cities, supplying public baths, fountains, and the lavish villas of the Roman elite who settled there. These country estates were not just farms, they were displays of immense wealth with intricate mosaic floors, painted walls, and heated baths, creating pockets of Italian luxury in the heart of the Mediterranean. This process of Romanization was a powerful cultural current. Latin became the language of administration and commerce, gradually supplanting local tongues. Roman law provided a new framework for justice and social order, while the pantheon of Roman gods merged with local deities, creating unique hybrid figures of worship. On an island like Cyprus, the ancient cult of the great goddess was seamlessly reinterpreted as the worship of Venus, the Roman equivalent of Aphrodite. This was not a simple erasure of the old ways, but a complex fusion. The native cultures of these islands did not vanish, they adapted, absorbing Roman styles and technologies while retaining elements of their own identity. The very stones of a Sardinian nurag might be repurposed for a Roman temple, and the descendants of Talaiotic slingers would eventually enlist as auxiliaries in the Roman army. This layered identity, forged under the eagle's wing, created the unique cultural bedrock upon which the medieval and modern histories of the Mediterranean would be built. How does an empire so vast manage to weave such different threads into a single, enduring fabric, and what happens when that fabric begins to fray at the edges? While Rome built its empire on grain and roads, another island culture had already mastered stone on a scale that defies belief. On the sun-scorched islands of Malta and Gozo, a people with no known name created the world's first freestanding stone architecture. Their temples rose from the earth over 5,000 years ago, centuries before a single block was laid for the Great Pyramid of Giza. The complex of Giwith above Gantija on Gozo, whose name means Giant's Tower, is a breathtaking example. Its colossal, curved walls are built from limestone blocks so massive that local folklore later claimed they were carried by a giantess. How did a society without metal tools, without the wheel, move and position these stones weighing many tons? The precision is staggering, with stones so perfectly fitted that a knife blade cannot be slipped between them. This was not crude stacking, this was architecture. The temples were not dark, enclosed spaces, but sophisticated structures designed with a profound understanding of their world. They feature forecourts for public gathering, elaborate passageways, and a series of cloverleaf-shaped chambers, creating a ritual landscape that feels both immense and intimate. At the Temple of Mnajdra, this genius extends to the heavens. Its lower temple is a perfect stone calendar. During the equinoxes, the rising sun's rays slice precisely through the main doorway, illuminating the central corridor. During the solstices, the light illuminates the edges of giant stone slabs, marking the sun's furthest journey north and south. This was a civilization that watched the sky and carved its cycles into the very bedrock of their island. Their spiritual life remains vivid in the artifacts they left behind. The famous sleeping lady figurine, discovered in a deep hypogeum or underground burial complex, depicts a woman reclining on a couch. She is not thin and graceful, but voluptuous, resting peacefully, perhaps in sleep or in death. She embodies a culture that revered concepts of fertility, rest, and an afterlife, suggesting a complex belief system far beyond simple survival. The evidence for ritual is overwhelming, from altars with traces of animal sacrifice to stone spheres that may have been used to move the gigantic temple blocks. Then, around 2,500 years before the Common Era, this vibrant, sophisticated culture vanished. The temple building ceased entirely. The islands appear to have been depopulated. There is no evidence of invasion, no layer of ash from a volcanic eruption, no sign of widespread disease. They simply disappeared, leaving their magnificent temples to the elements, silent and empty. What catastrophic event, or perhaps what slow failure of their fragile island ecosystem, could have led to such a complete and final end? The mystery of Malta is a haunting reminder that even the greatest stone monuments cannot always preserve the people who built them. The jagged coastline of the eastern Adriatic was a world of pirates and warriors, a labyrinth of islands where the Illyrian tribes built their fortified world. These were not a single, unified nation, but a collection of fiercely independent peoples bound by a common culture and a mastery of the sea. Their homes were not cities on the plains, but imposing hilltop strongholds known as gradine. Perched high on rocky crags, these settlements offered commanding views of the sea lanes below, allowing them to control traffic and spot both prey and danger from miles away. Life here was rugged and self-reliant, shaped by the stark beauty of the Dinaric Alps and the unpredictable waters of the Adriatic. From these natural fortresses, they launched their swift, maneuverable ships, becoming the most feared pirates of their age. They did not just sail the sea, they owned it, striking merchant vessels with impunity and challenging any power that dared to enter their domain. Yet their legacy is far more than one of plunder. When they came ashore, the Illyrians revealed an artistic soul. They were master metalworkers, crafting intricate bronze and silver jewelry that spoke of both status and spiritual belief. Elaborate fibulae or decorative brooches held their clothing together with elegant complexity. Heavy, ornate torques circled their necks, and belts were adorned with finely worked plaques, each piece a testament to a society that valued skill and beauty alongside martial prowess. This delicate artistry stands in stark contrast to their reputation as ruthless sea raiders. For generations, their piracy was a tolerated nuisance, but then a new power began to flex its muscles across the water. The Roman Republic, having secured the Italian peninsula, could not allow these disruptions to their growing maritime trade. The Illyrian Wars were not a single conflict, but a series of brutal confrontations spanning decades. The Romans were shocked by the martial skill and ferocity of the Illyrian tribes, particularly under the rule of the formidable Queen Tutor. She famously told Roman ambassadors that piracy was a legitimate trade for her people, a declaration that amounted to an act of war. Rome's response was swift and devastating. Their legions, more accustomed to set peace battles on land, adapted to fight a naval war, systematically besieging the Illyrian hill forts and crushing their fleets. One by one, the strongholds fell. The final great rebellion was led by the last Illyrian king, Genthius, but his defeat marked the end of their independence. The Adriatic was no longer an Illyrian lake, but a Roman sea. Yet conquest was not erasure. The Illyrians were gradually woven into the fabric of the Roman Empire, their warriors becoming valued auxiliaries in the legions, their lands becoming the prosperous province of Illyricum. Their spirit never fully vanished. You can still hear echoes of their language in the place names of the modern Balkans, and their cultural DNA forms a deep, resilient substratum in the region, a foundation upon which later histories were built. How does a culture of fierce independence find a way to endure, not through defiance, but by becoming part of the very empire that conquered it? The power of Axum reached far beyond its highland capital, stretching across the water to claim strategic islands. On the Daulak archipelago in the Red Sea, the Axumites established fortified ports that became vital way stations for their immense trading empire. From these island bases, they controlled the maritime routes connecting the Roman world with India and the interior of Africa. Their ships carried ivory from the African hinterlands, tortoiseshell, rhinoceros horn, and live animals for distant zoos, returning with silk, spices, and precious metals. This was not a simple exchange of goods, it was the lifeblood of a superpower, and the islands were the valves that regulated its flow. The kingdom's sophistication was minted into metal, for Axum was one of the first African states to produce its own coinage. These were not crude imitations, but beautifully struck coins in gold, silver, and bronze, bearing the portraits of its kings and Christian crosses after their conversion. This currency was a statement trusted from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, declaring Axum's place as an equal among the great empires. Their faith was carved into the sky itself. The great stelae of Axum, towering multi-story obelisks hewn from single blocks of stone, are among the largest monuments ever erected in the ancient world. They functioned as elaborate grave markers for the elite, their intricately carved false doors and windows representing magnificent palaces for the afterlife. This architectural ambition reveals a society capable of organizing labor on a staggering scale, a civilization confident in its power and its connection to the divine. Their conversion to Christianity in the 4th century under King Azana made them one of the world's earliest Christian states, forging a unique religious and cultural identity that has endured in Ethiopia for millennia. The remote island of Socotra, with its otherworldly landscapes and unique flora, also bears traces of Axumite presence, suggesting their network was even more extensive than we know. How does a land-based empire, no matter how powerful, maintain its grip on distant islands and the vast, unpredictable sea lanes between them? The answer lies in a network so robust it could weather any storm until the day it could not. The power of the Himyarite kingdom reached from the mountains of Yemen to a lonely island adrift in the Indian Ocean. Socotra was not just a possession, it was a strategic jewel, a vital way station for merchant ships braving the long journey between the Mediterranean and the ports of India. The island itself seemed to belong to another world, its landscape dotted with the bizarre and beautiful dragon's blood trees, their umbrella-shaped crowns and red sap creating a scene both alien and ancient. This was a place of biological wonder, and the Himyarites understood its immense value. They left their mark not in grand cities but in the stone of the island itself. Ancient inscriptions carved into the rock, written in the old South Arabian script, bear silent witness to their presence, like forgotten road signs pointing to a lost empire. Their control over Socotra was about more than just regulating the flow of spices, silks, and incense. The Himyarites were key players in a religious transformation sweeping across the region. As their kingdom gradually converted from polytheism to Judaism and later saw the spread of Christianity, these new faiths followed the trade routes to the island. It is believed that Himyarite influence was instrumental in introducing Christianity to Socotra, where it took root in remarkable isolation. For centuries, a small community of Nestorian Christians practiced their faith there, preserving ancient rites long after they had faded elsewhere, their prayers echoing in a land of dragons' blood trees. This profound isolation acted as a preservative, creating a living museum. Socotra safeguarded not only its unique flora and fauna, found nowhere else on Earth, but also a cultural heritage that became a time capsule of ancient interactions. The island became a layer cake of history where the footprints of Himyarite traders, early Christian ascetics, and later Arab sailors all left their trace without completely erasing what came before. Socotra stands as a powerful reminder that some of the most significant crossroads of civilization were not always bustling metropolises, but sometimes quiet, lonely islands where the world simply passed through, leaving behind fragments of itself. This legacy of trade and faith carried across the water finds a stunning parallel far to the north, where another island civilization turned its isolation into a bastion of spiritual devotion and breathtaking art. The deep silence of Socotra's ancient faith gives way to the bustling wharves of another island crossroads. In the warm waters of the Persian Gulf, the island of Bahrain pulsed as the heart of the legendary Dilmun civilization. For over 1,000 years, starting in the 3rd millennium before the Common Era, this was not just a settlement but a sanctuary and a supermarket for the ancient world. Its reputation was so immense that it echoed in the world's oldest great work of literature, the Epic of Gilgamesh. In that story, Dilmun is described as a pure and sacred land, a place of immortals free from sickness and sorrow. This was not merely poetic fantasy, it was a reflection of its real-world status as a neutral, prosperous, and spiritually significant hub. Dilmun's genius lay in its connections. It became the indispensable middleman, the vital link in a chain that stretched from the mighty city-states of Mesopotamia in the west to the enigmatic Indus Valley civilization in the east. Their merchants did not just move goods, they moved cultures, facilitating the exchange of ideas, technologies, and artistic styles between two of the world's earliest cradles of civilization. The proof of their wealth and sophistication is written across the landscape in a way that is almost unimaginable. Even today, the northern part of Bahrain is dominated by vast fields of burial mounds, a sprawling city of the dead that once contained over 170,000 tombs. These are not simple piles of stone, but carefully constructed tumuli, each one a testament to a society that invested profound effort in honoring its ancestors. The scale is simply staggering, one of the largest prehistoric cemeteries on the entire planet. At the center of this world stood the ancient capital, today known as Qalat al-Bahrain. This was not a single city, but a layered one, a tell built up over centuries as successive civilizations constructed on the ruins of their predecessors. Here, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of Dilmun's bustling port, its warehouses, its temples, and the homes of its people. This was the administrative heart, the place where the wealth of the world was counted, stored, and sent on its way. And what wealth it was! Dilmun's prosperity was built on a foundation of three key pillars. The first was its control over the trade in copper, which was sourced from Oman and shipped north to the metal-hungry cities of Mesopotamia. The second was the bounty of the sea, the luminous pearls harvested from the Gulf's oyster beds, which became a symbol of luxury for millennia. The third was the fruit of the land, the sweet, nutritious dates from its vast palm groves. Yet, all of this would have been impossible without one miraculous resource: fresh water. In a region of stark aridity, Bahrain was an oasis. Powerful, natural freshwater springs erupted from the seafloor around the island, creating a phenomenon known as sweet water in the midst of salt. This access to life-giving water in a parched world was the true source of Dilmun's power, allowing it to sustain a large population and become a verdant haven for weary sailors and their crews. It was this combination of natural bounty and strategic location that allowed a single island to become a legend, a name whispered in epic poetry and carved into the clay tablets of kings. How does a civilization that so perfectly masters the art of connection eventually find itself disconnected from the flow of time? The life-giving springs of Dilmun gave rise to legends, but on the island of Sri Lanka, known to ancient geographers as Taprobane, an entire civilization was built by mastering water itself. The Anuradhapura kingdom, founded in the 4th century before the Common Era, did not just adapt to its environment, it reshaped the very landscape with an ambition that still stuns the modern mind. At the heart of their power was a hydrological revolution, a network of artificial reservoirs known as tanks. These were not small ponds, but vast inland seas carved from the earth. The Kalawiwa Reservoir, for instance, was created by a massive dam nearly 4 miles long, holding back a lake that sprawled over thousands of acres. This was engineering on a staggering scale, designed to capture the precious monsoon rains and store them for the long dry season. From these giant tanks, a lacework of canals, some lined with stone, carried water for miles to feed smaller tanks and then to intricate field channels, creating a cascade of hydration that turned the arid plains into a lush green breadbasket. This system did more than prevent famine. It enabled a population density that would rival many modern nations, supporting a sprawling urban civilization in the heart of the tropics. The sacred city of Anuradhapura was the glittering capital of this hydraulic empire. The city's layout was a masterpiece of urban planning, with designated residential quarters, commercial zones, hospitals, and even parks, all laid out according to a precise grid. At its spiritual center rose the great stupas, colossal domed monuments that held sacred relics. The Jetavanaramaya stupa was one of the tallest structures in the ancient world, a mountain of brick that required over 90 million baked bricks to complete. Its scale was a declaration of both piety and immense organizational power, but perhaps the most poignant symbol of their enduring faith was the Sri Mahabodhi, a sacred fig tree. This was no ordinary tree. It was grown from a cutting brought from Bodh Gaya in India, a direct descendant of the very tree under which the Buddha attained enlightenment. For over 2,300 years, it has been nurtured and protected, making it the oldest documented living tree planted by humans, a living thread connecting the modern world to the dawn of Buddhism. The Anuradhapura kingdom set a pattern of innovation and spiritual devotion that would define Sri Lankan civilization for more than 2 millennia, proving that an island's true strength lies not in resisting nature, but in harnessing its rhythms with profound intelligence. What does it take for a society to not only build for its own time, but to plant a tree whose shade will shelter generations 2,000 years in the future? The spiritual revolution arrived on the island with a single missionary journey. In the 3rd century before the Common Era, the Indian Emperor Ashoka sent his own son, the monk Mahinda, to Sri Lanka. This was not a conquest by armies but by ideas. Mahinda's teachings resonated deeply with the Sinhalese king, who embraced Buddhism and made it the state religion. This decision transformed every facet of Anuradhapuра's society, turning the kingdom into a beacon of Theravada Buddhism that would shine for over 1,000 years. This faith became the very soul of Sinhalese culture, the bedrock of their identity, their art, and their worldview. You can feel this profound fusion of faith and stone at the Isarumunia rock temple. Here, master craftsmen did not build a temple, they carved one directly into the living granite of a mountainside. Intricate sculptures emerge from the rock itself, including the famous lover's carving, a poignant scene of deep tenderness that has captivated visitors for centuries. Within the cool, shadowed chambers, monks would meditate, their chants echoing against walls that were once part of the earth. This was an architecture of reverence, a literal embedding of belief into the island's foundation. This spiritual awakening ignited an explosion of learning and literature. The Sinhalese script, derived from ancient Brahmi, was perfected to record the Buddha's teachings. Scribes meticulously wrote on palm leaves, preserving not only religious texts but also historical chronicles like the Mahavamsa, a great dynasty chronicle that meticulously recorded the island's history, blending fact with myth to create a powerful national epic. The monasteries of Anuradhapura became legendary universities, attracting scholars and pilgrims from across Southeast Asia. Monks from Burma, Thailand, and Cambodia traveled to this island citadel of learning to study the purest form of the Buddha's teachings, carrying the doctrines of Theravada Buddhism back to their homelands and shaping the spiritual map of an entire continent. Yet this luminous culture existed under a constant shadow. Powerful kingdoms from South India looked upon this prosperous island with covetous eyes, launching repeated invasions across the narrow strait. The Anuradhapura kingdom did not just survive these onslaughts, it consistently repelled them. This required more than just bravery on the battlefield. It demanded a deeply organized society, a resilient economy funded by its sophisticated agriculture, and an unshakable national unity forged by a shared faith. Each repelled invasion reinforced their unique cultural character, proving that their greatest strength was not just their mastery of water, but the unbreakable spirit they had cultivated. How does a civilization balance the gentle pursuit of enlightenment with the harsh necessities of war and manage to preserve its soul through it all? Their story begins not with grand monuments, but with broken pieces of clay scattered across thousands of miles of ocean. The Lapita people left behind a calling card as distinctive as a fingerprint, their pottery stamped with intricate geometric patterns of dots, lines, and faces. Finding this same artistic signature on islands separated by vast, empty stretches of water is like finding the same key that opens doors across an entire continent. This was not a single migration, but a purposeful, sustained explosion across the Pacific. Starting around 1500 years before the Common Era, they sailed from the islands of near Oceania, places already visible from one another, and made the conscious leap into the great unknown of remote Oceania. Their journey was a deliberate starburst of humanity, reaching from the Bismarck archipelago all the way to Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa, settling the very islands that would become the cradle of Polynesian culture. Their success hinged on a vessel that was a masterpiece of ancient engineering, the double-hulled outrigger canoe. These were not fragile rafts, but massive, seaworthy craft capable of carrying dozens of people, along with their plants, animals, and all their hopes for a new home. Lashed together with strong cordage and powered by vast woven sails, these canoes were stable enough to withstand the ocean's fury and spacious enough for voyages that could last for weeks. But a great ship is useless without a way to steer it. The Lapita voyagers possessed a knowledge system as sophisticated as any map, a deep understanding of celestial navigation. They read the stars not as distant lights, but as a moving compass in the night sky, memorizing the paths of specific constellations to hold a steady course. They watched the patterns of swells, the flight paths of seabirds, and the color of the clouds, interpreting the subtle language of the sea itself to find land that lay far beyond the horizon. They did not simply drift, they explored with intention, and when they found a new island, they brought a complete toolkit for life. Their canoes were floating arks carrying domesticated pigs, chickens, and dogs, and crucially, the seedlings of vital crops like taro, yams, and breadfruit. They were not just explorers, but the first farmers of the Pacific, transforming each new island into a sustainable home. This was one of humanity's most audacious chapters, a testament to courage and ingenuity that would echo for generations. How does a society develop the confidence to sail into a void, trusting only the stars to guide them to a home they have never seen? The vast ocean voyages of the Lapita people set the stage for one of humanity's most dramatic island stories. On the most isolated inhabited landmass on Earth, a civilization flourished in complete solitude, creating a legacy of stone that still stares out from its shores. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is a speck of volcanic rock in the vast southeastern Pacific, a place where a people created nearly 900 colossal stone figures known as the moai. These statues are not merely sculptures, they are the frozen heart of a society that turned its entire island into a sacred landscape. The birthplace of almost all of them is the volcanic quarry of Rano Raraku. Walking its slopes is an eerie experience, a workshop frozen in time. Dozens of moai remain partially carved from the bedrock, caught in the act of being born from the stone. Others stand buried up to their necks, their massive bodies hidden beneath the earth, giving the hill a strange, populated feeling. The largest moai ever carved, nicknamed El Gigante, still lies attached to the rock, a colossal 21 meters long and weighing an estimated 270 tons. It was a project that was never finished. The central mystery has always been one of movement. How did a society without wheels, without metal tools, and without large animals to provide draft power, transport these multi-ton giants across miles of rugged terrain? The theories are as varied as they are ingenious. Some suggest they were walked upright in a rocking motion, carefully inched forward by teams using ropes. Others propose they were laid on wooden sleds or log rollers, pulled along specially prepared roads. Recent experiments show that a relatively small team could indeed maneuver a replica moai by rocking it side to side, a method that would make the statues appear to walk across the land, a sight that must have been both awe-inspiring and terrifying. But the moai were only half the story. They needed to be raised. Once at their ahu, or ceremonial platforms, they were carefully levered up, using a system of stones and logs until they stood upright, their blank eyes gazing inland over the clans they were built to protect. This was not the work of a primitive tribe, but of a complex, stratified society with skilled engineers, master carvers, and a powerful religious authority that could command the labor of thousands. Over centuries, this very success sowed the seeds of crisis. To move the moai, the islanders needed wood, lots of it, for sleds, rollers, and levers. Pollen analysis tells a tragic story of gradual ecological suicide. The lush palm forests that once covered the island were systematically cleared. Without trees, the soil eroded, crop yields fell, and the islanders could no longer build the seagoing canoes that allowed them to fish for tuna in deeper waters. The society that had built giants began to starve. In this crisis, a new cult emerged, one that replaced the ancestral power of the moai. It was the ritual of the birdman, or Tangata Manu. Each year, contenders would swim through shark-infested waters to the offshore islet of Motu Nui, risking their lives to retrieve the first egg laid by a sooty tern. The chief or warrior whose representative won this deadly race was granted immense power for the following year. This shift in Chinese letter marked a fundamental change, from veneration of stone ancestors to a desperate competition for the favor of a living god. By the time the first European ships arrived in the 18th century, the golden age of Rapa Nui was already a memory. The society had collapsed into warfare and famine, and many of the moai had been deliberately toppled. The story of this island is a haunting lesson in the delicate balance between human ambition and the fragile environment that sustains it. How does a civilization that can move mountains of stone find itself unable to prevent its own world from shrinking? Across the vast Pacific, another island civilization perfected a life in perfect rhythm with the land and sea. The Hawaiian chiefdoms created a world of intricate social order and profound environmental wisdom long before their unification. Their society was bound by the kapu system, a sacred code of laws that dictated everything from daily conduct to religious observance. To break a kapu was not merely a crime, it was an offense against the gods, often punishable by death. This system maintained a rigid social hierarchy with the alii, or chiefs, believed to possess a divine mana or spiritual power that directly impacted the prosperity of the people. Yet this strict order was balanced by a system of breathtaking sustainability. The Ahupua was a brilliant land division, a pie-shaped slice of territory that ran from the misty mountain peaks all the way down to the coral reefs. Each Ahupua contained all the resources a community needed to thrive. Villagers living in the uplands would manage the forest for wood and bird catching. Those in the middle slopes would farm taro in elaborate terraced ponds called loi, and the coastal dwellers would harvest the bounty of the ocean. This system ensured a reciprocal exchange of goods and prevented any single area from being overexploited, a testament to their deep understanding of ecological balance. Their genius for harnessing nature extended into the sea itself. They were master aquaculturists, constructing massive shoreline fish ponds by building long stone walls across shallow bays. These ponds, some spanning hundreds of acres, allowed them to raise mullet and milkfish, creating a reliable and sustainable source of protein that supported a large population. This mastery of their environment was matched by their mastery of the ocean that surrounded them. They were the inheritors of a great Polynesian voyaging tradition, navigating the open Pacific in magnificent double-hulled canoes, the wa. These vessels were capable of long-distance travel, connecting the Hawaiian Islands to a wider Polynesian world and bringing new plants, animals, and ideas to their shores. Their rich culture was their living history. In the absence of a written language, they preserved their genealogies, myths, and history through mesmerizing oral chants, the oli, and the expressive movements of the hula. They created objects of stunning beauty, most notably featherwork. Skilled artisans would weave tiny, vibrant feathers from thousands of birds into magnificent cloaks, helmets, and leis, which were worn as symbols of the highest rank and divine status. Every aspect of their world, from the strict kapu to the flowing hula, reflected a universe where humanity, nature, and the gods were inextricably linked. How does a society so perfectly adapted to its island home navigate the arrival of a new world, one that sees its sacred laws not as divine order but as chains to be broken? The final great wave of Polynesian voyagers found a world turned upside down. Their ancestors had mastered tropical seas, but when the waka, their great canoes, landed on the shores of Aotearoa, they encountered a land of chilling winds and towering, snow-capped mountains. These were the Maori, and their story is one of the most dramatic reinventions in human history. They had to abandon the coconut and breadfruit of their homeland, learning instead to hunt the massive, flightless moa bird and to harvest the roots of the fern. In this new, often challenging environment, they built a culture of profound strength and artistry. Their communities centered on the pa, villages ingeniously fortified on strategic hilltops, often the steep slopes of extinct volcanic cones. These were not just settlements, they were formidable strongholds protected by multiple palisades, terraced slopes, and deep food storage pits designed to withstand long sieges. Within these pa, their artistic spirit flourished in wood. The Waranui, or meeting house, is the heart of a Maori community, and its entire structure is a sacred representation of an ancestor. The carved figures along the roof beam are the spine, the barge boards are the outstretched arms, and the interior is the sheltered belly of the ancestor embracing the tribe. Every surface tells a story, with intricate carvings depicting genealogical lines and legendary heroes, a physical history book in wood. This same artistry was inscribed directly onto the skin. Moko, the traditional facial tattoo, is far more than decoration. Each swirling, spiraling pattern is a unique signature, a map of a person's ancestry, social status, and personal achievements. Received through a painful process of chiseling pigment into the skin, it was a permanent mark of identity and a testament to incredible endurance. Their rich oral tradition preserved a cosmology of powerful gods, from the Sky Father Ranginui and the Earth Mother Papatuanuku, whose forced separation by their children created the world, to the trickster moai, who, according to legend, fished the North Island of New Zealand from the sea. This vibrant, self-sufficient world was forever altered by the arrival of Europeans, first sighted by the Dutch explorer Abel Tasman and later mapped by Captain James Cook. Initial trade in muskets and metal tools destabilized the balance of power among tribes, leading to devastating intertribal musket wars. The pivotal moment came in 1840, with the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi between the British Crown and many Maori chiefs. Intended to establish British governance while guaranteeing Maori rights to their lands and treasures, the treaty instead became the source of a long and complex struggle over sovereignty and land, a conflict whose echoes shape New Zealand to this very day. The Maori journey shows us a civilization's incredible capacity to adapt and the profound challenges that arise when two worlds collide. Centuries after the Lapita voyages, a new power rose from the sea, one that turned the scattered islands of the Central Pacific into a unified sphere of influence. The Tai Tonga dynasty began its rule around 950 years after the Common Era, forging a maritime empire that would endure for nearly 400 years. Their authority stretched across a vast ocean expanse, weaving parts of Fiji and Samoa into a single political and cultural tapestry. This was not rule by conquest in the traditional sense, but a sophisticated thalassocracy built on sacred lineage, strategic marriage alliances, and the undeniable power of its great sailing vessels. At the heart of this power was the royal capital of Ma on the island of Tongatapu. Here, the divine status of the Tai Tonga kings was etched into the very landscape with the langi. These are not simple burial mounds, but monumental royal tombs, immense terraced platforms constructed from colossal, finely fitted coral limestone slabs. Each block weighs many tons, and the precision of their placement without any mortar rivals the best stonework of the ancient world. To stand before the Langi Namola or the Langi Heketa is to understand the sheer organizational force of this civilization, a society capable of marshalling labor and engineering skill to immortalize its rulers. The social structure that supported this ambition was intricate and rigid. At the apex was the divine Tai Tonga himself, a direct descendant of the gods. Below him were layers of chiefly and noble ranks, each with specific duties and privileges, and at the foundation were the commoners and craftspeople who worked the land and built the monuments. This hierarchy was the engine of the empire, and its lifeblood was the Tongan Road. This was not a physical path, but a sacred network of sea lanes, a web of trade and tribute that connected distant islands to the central authority at Ma. Along these routes sailed the Great Kalia, the massive double-hulled canoes that were the dreadnoughts of the Pacific. These vessels, some capable of carrying over 100 people, were the ultimate symbols of Tongan power. They carried not only warriors and nobles, but also finely woven mats, decorated barkcloth, and foodstuffs as tribute, returning with exotic goods and reinforcing the bonds of obligation that held the empire together. For centuries, this system allowed a small group of islands to project its influence across thousands of square miles of ocean, creating a political and cultural commonwealth that shaped the entire region. What does it take to maintain such a far-flung network of allegiance, and what happens when the very idea of divine kingship begins to fracture from within? While the Tongan kings built their tombs from coral limestone, another ocean people carved their foundations from the heart of the jungle. The Chamorro civilization flourished across the Mariana Islands, including Guam, for nearly 4,000 years. Their most enduring legacy stands silent in the forests, the lote stones. These are unique structures of two parts, a sturdy pillar of coral or limestone called a halagi, and a capstone known as a tossa. Placed in parallel rows, these stone pairs lifted the wooden frames of homes high above the ground, protecting them from floods and pests and creating cool, shaded spaces below for work and social life. The size of the stones directly reflected a family status, with the largest pillars reaching the height of a person, monuments to a society deeply rooted in its land. Their connection to the sea was just as profound. The Chamorro were master boat builders, crafting swift, ocean-going proas, vessels with asymmetrical hulls that allowed for incredible speed and stability on long voyages. Their language is a living artifact of this long isolation, a unique branch of the Austronesian family unrelated to its Polynesian or Micronesian neighbors, a linguistic puzzle that hints at an ancient and independent journey across the Pacific. This vibrant, self-sufficient world was shattered in the 17th century with the arrival of Spanish colonizers. The quest for souls and territory ignited decades of brutal conflict known as the Spanish Chamorro Wars. The Chamorro, fierce defenders of their home, were ultimately overwhelmed by European diseases and military force. The survivors were forcibly relocated from their ancestral lands and villages into a few centralized mission towns, a devastating policy designed to break their social structure and facilitate conversion. This cultural onslaught was immense, yet it was not total. Through centuries of foreign rule, the Chamorro people tenaciously preserved the core of their identity. Their language, though infused with loanwords, survived. Their deep-seated respect for elders and communal ties endured. Today, the lote stone stands as a powerful national symbol, its resilient form a testament to a people who, like their foundational stones, have borne immense weight and refused to be toppled. How does a culture survive when the very ground it stands on is taken away? And what does it take to rebuild a world from memory alone? A world where money is too heavy to steal, and wealth is measured by a story everyone knows but no one can move. On the island of Yap, value was carved from the earth itself in the form of rai, colossal stone discs that challenge everything we think we know about currency. These are not small coins, but massive wheels of calcite, some as tall as a person and weighing more than a family car. The largest examples could weigh several tons, yet their true worth was not in their size but in their journey. The stone for these monuments was not even found on Yap itself. It was quarried hundreds of miles away on the islands of Palau, a perilous voyage across the open ocean. Imagine the ambition, the sheer audacity of sailing bamboo rafts laden with these monstrous stones, navigating by the stars and the swells, with the very definition of wealth riding on the waves. The difficulty of that voyage, the number of lives lost, and the sheer effort involved were what gave each piece its value. A rai transported during a legendary storm was worth infinitely more than a similar-sized piece from an uneventful trip. This was an economy built on epic tales of human endurance. Once a stone arrived on Yap, its active life was essentially over. It did not need to change hands. In fact, moving it was impractical and unnecessary. The entire community simply knew who owned which stone. Its value was cemented in the collective memory, in the oral history of its acquisition. If a family used a rai as a dowry or to settle a debt, everyone acknowledged the change of ownership, even though the stone itself remained exactly where it had always been, perhaps half sunk in the mud or leaning against a family compound. This system could only function within a highly structured, hierarchical chiefdom where social order and verbal contracts were absolute. The chiefs maintained the ledgers of this stone-based economy in their heads and through public consensus, their authority ensuring that a promise written in memory was as solid as a promise written on paper. This creates a fascinating paradox, a form of immense, tangible wealth that was completely illiquid, its power derived entirely from faith in a shared story. What does it say about a society that builds its economy not on possession, but on the immovable weight of common knowledge and communal trust? The weight of a story can build an economy, but the story of a single death can define an entire civilization. On the scattered islands of Vanuatu, a powerful chief named Roy Motta forged a legacy so profound his final act reshaped the world. In the early 17th century, his rule was marked by a rare and cherished peace, uniting warring tribes across the islands of Efate and Lelepa. But his death was not an end, it was a meticulously orchestrated event. According to oral tradition, Roy Motta was poisoned, and as he lay dying, he chose the site of his own burial. He was carried to the small, uninhabited island of Ritoka, followed by his family and closest retainers. There, a profound and chilling ritual unfolded. His loyal followers, perhaps willingly as part of a sacred duty, were buried alive alongside him to serve their chief in the afterlife. They were laid to rest in a communal grave, their bodies arranged with care, surrounded by their most precious shell and bone ornaments. This was not an act of cruelty, but one of ultimate honor and belief, a final demonstration of a chief's authority that extended beyond the grave. The site was then declared taboo, a place of such spiritual power that no one would dare live there again for centuries, preserving it perfectly until its modern discovery. Today, this Chief Roy Motta domain is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a sacred landscape that offers a raw, unvarnished window into the soul of Vanuatu's past. It is a physical story of power, loyalty, and the deep-seated rituals that bound a society together. This powerful unity, however, existed within a sea of breathtaking diversity. Across Vanuatu's 80-plus islands, over 100 distinct languages evolved, a density of tongues unmatched almost anywhere else on Earth. This linguistic tapestry tells its own story, one of communities living in relative isolation for more than 3,000 years, each developing its own unique customs, art forms, and worldview, yet all connected by the same ocean and the same foundational history. How does a civilization nurture such profound differences while also rallying around a single, unifying figure? The answer lies in the delicate balance between island isolation and the powerful bonds of shared tradition. The Kingdom of Ryukyu mastered the art of connection from its island home. On the main island of Okinawa, a unique civilization arose that turned its position between empires into immense prosperity. For over 4 centuries, the Ryukyu Kingdom was the essential trading hub of the East China Sea, its ships carrying goods and ideas between the mighty courts of China and Japan, and as far south as the kingdoms of Southeast Asia. This was not a kingdom built on military conquest, but on commercial diplomacy and cultural synthesis. The landscape of the island still bears witness to this era of powerful local lords marked by the Gyusuku. These are not the stone forts of European knights, but unique Ryukyuan castles, built with curved walls of coral limestone that blend seamlessly with the natural rock. They served as both fortified centers of administration and as sacred sites, symbols of the spiritual and political authority that governed the islands. Above all these stood Shuri Castle, the magnificent royal palace, with its vibrant red lacquer, sweeping, undulating roofs, and a grand courtyard designed for receiving foreign dignitaries. Shuri was a masterpiece of architectural fusion, reflecting Chinese and Japanese influences while remaining distinctly Ryukyuan. It was the beating heart of the kingdom, a place where policy and pageantry intertwined. The culture that flourished here was one of refined artistry and disciplined strength. Ryukyuan craftspeople produced exquisite textiles known as bingota, fabrics dyed with brilliant, intricate patterns, and delicate lacquer ware inlaid with mother-of-pearl. At the same time, a powerful martial tradition was born from a ban on weapons imposed by invading forces. The locals developed a form of unarmed combat called ti, meaning hand, which would eventually evolve into the world-renowned discipline of karate. This was a culture that could create breathtaking beauty while honing the human body into a weapon. The kingdom's entire existence was a delicate diplomatic dance. It paid formal tribute to the Chinese Ming and Qing dynasties, which granted it legitimacy and access to vast trade networks, while simultaneously managing a complex and increasingly influential relationship with the powerful Satsuma domain of Japan. For centuries, the Ryukyu kings navigated this balance with immense skill, maintaining their de facto independence by serving as a neutral intermediary. This golden age of cultural and economic flourishing could not last forever. As Japan modernized during the Meiji Restoration, it moved to consolidate its territory. In 1879, the Japanese government formally annexed the Ryukyu Islands, dissolving the kingdom and establishing Okinawa Prefecture. The independent voice of this island civilization was silenced, its royal line ended, and its unique culture was pressured to assimilate. The story of the Ryukyu Kingdom is a powerful testament to how an island can become a bridge between worlds, and a haunting reminder of what can be lost when that bridge is commandeered by a single, dominant power. 14,000 years is a time span that defies easy comprehension. Long before emperors or shoguns, the Japanese archipelago was home to the Jomon people, a Neolithic society whose culture endured for a breathtaking 140 centuries. Their world was not one of sprawling cities or written records, but of deep, sustainable harmony with the forests and coasts. We know them by the beautiful imprint they left in clay, the chord-marked patterns that give the Jomon period its name. Their pottery is among the oldest ever discovered, vessels that are both practical and profoundly artistic, decorated by pressing rope into the wet clay to create intricate, swirling designs. Each piece is unique, a fingerprint of a culture that expressed its identity through the very objects of daily life. They lived in semi-subterranean pit dwellings, homes dug into the earth with thatched roofs, which provided warmth in winter and coolness in summer. These were not the temporary camps of nomads, but the foundations of a settled, semi-sedentary society. Their diet was a testament to their intimate knowledge of the land, a sophisticated blend of hunting deer and boar, gathering nuts and plants, and harvesting the immense bounty of the sea, from salmon and trout to deep-water fish and shellfish. This stable, resource-rich life allowed their spiritual world to flourish in remarkable ways. They crafted mysterious clay figurines known as dogu. These small, abstract human forms, with their large, piercing eyes and exaggerated features, are often described as resembling someone in a spacesuit. Many were deliberately broken, perhaps used in healing rituals where a figurine would absorb an illness or misfortune before being shattered to release its hold. Their rituals also unfolded on a grander scale, at stone circles like the one at Oyu in northern Japan. These were not the towering monoliths of Stonehenge, but carefully arranged circles of river stones aligned with the movements of the sun, serving as sacred calendars and communal gathering places. The Jomon present us with a powerful alternative narrative of human development. They achieved profound cultural complexity without relying on agriculture, proving that a society can be sophisticated, artistic, and spiritually rich while living in a state of balance with nature for thousands upon thousands of years. How does a civilization measure its success? Not by the monuments it builds over others, but by the millennia it endures as part of the world. A profound transformation began to reshape the islands of Japan. The Jomon way of life, with its deep harmony with the forest, gave way to a new era defined by the rhythm of flooded fields. The Yayoi period, beginning around 300 years before the Common Era, was a revolution imported from the sea. Migrants from the Korean peninsula brought with them two technologies that would change everything: wet rice agriculture and metallurgy. the knowledge of how to cultivate rice in intricate paddies allowed for a massive and reliable food surplus. This was not just a new way of eating, it was a new way of living, supporting larger, more permanent communities and a population boom that spread across the archipelago. Alongside the rice came metal, the ability to cast both bronze for ceremonial bells and weapons and iron for practical tools that were sharper and more durable than stone. This new wealth did not create an equal society. For the first time, clear and rigid social stratification emerged. Control over the rice paddies and the metal trade created a powerful elite class, while the majority labored in the fields. Society organized itself into small, competing chiefdoms that the Chinese would later refer to as Wa. These were not yet kingdoms, but rather clusters of villages united under a single chieftain whose power was both political and religious. To protect their hard-won resources, these communities constructed large, moated settlements. Imagine a village surrounded by a deep, water-filled ditch with a single, easily defended entrance. These were not just villages, they were fortresses, a clear sign that the new abundance came with new reasons for conflict and the need for defense. The spiritual life of the islands also began to crystallize during this time. The animistic beliefs of the Jomon, the sense that spirits resided in natural phenomena, evolved into the earliest forms of Shinto. This was a reverence for the kami, the sacred essence found in mountains, rivers, trees, and powerful forces like wind and thunder. Rituals were developed to honor these spirits, seeking their blessing for good harvests and community well-being, laying a spiritual foundation that remains central to Japan today. Linguistically, this period is when the roots of the Japanese language, as distinct from its Korean and other neighbors, truly began to grow and spread. For the first time, the fog of prehistory parts, and we get an outside glimpse of these island people. A Chinese chronicle from the 3rd century, the Records of the Three Kingdoms, describes the people of Wa. It speaks of a land divided into many chiefdoms, of a queen named Himiko who ruled through sorcery and diplomacy, and of a society marked by strict social customs. This brief external observation confirms the archaeological record, painting a picture of a vibrant, complex, and sometimes turbulent society emerging from its ancient past. The Yayoi period was the essential crucible, the time when the fundamental elements of Japanese civilization were fused together, setting the stage for the rise of the legendary Yamato state. What happens when these competing chiefdoms finally unite under a single, powerful ruler? And how does an island civilization begin to see itself as an empire? The first people to watch the strange ships approach their shores were the Taino. Across the islands of the Caribbean, from the Bahamas to Cuba to Hispaniola, their villages were centers of a sophisticated society, a world that would soon be shattered. They lived in complex hierarchical communities led by powerful chiefs known as caciques, who governed from large, circular plazas. The heart of these plazas was the baiti, a carefully leveled ball court surrounded by stone monoliths. This was far more than a game, it was a sacred ritual. Teams would compete using a solid rubber ball, keeping it airborne using only their hips, elbows, and heads. The game was a reenactment of cosmic battles, a way to honor the gods, resolve conflicts between communities, and sometimes, tragically, a ritual where the losers could be sacrificed. Their survival was rooted in the land. The Taino were master farmers who transformed the forest into productive gardens using a system called kanuko. They would create large mounds of soil which were then planted with a variety of crops like cassava, sweet potatoes, peanuts, and peppers. Cassava, a tuber that could be poisonous if not prepared correctly, was their staple. They developed an intricate process of grating, pressing, and baking it to create a flatbread called kasabe. They also cultivated and smoked tobacco, using it in religious ceremonies and for medicinal purposes, a practice the Europeans would quickly adopt and spread around the world. Their spiritual life was woven into every part of their world. They believed in a pantheon of nature spirits and ancestors who they called zemis. These were not distant gods, but accessible forces that resided in natural objects. The Taino carved intricate representations of these zemes from wood, stone, and bone. A zeme could be a small, three-pointed stone that promised fertility for the soil, or a fearsome, large sculpture that guarded a village. They were conduits to the spiritual realm, housed in special shrines and consulted by shamans for guidance and healing. This vibrant, interconnected world collapsed with breathtaking speed. Christopher Columbus's arrival in 1492 marked the beginning of the end. The Taino had no immunity to old-world diseases like smallpox and measles, and epidemics ravaged their population. Those who survived faced brutal enslavement on Spanish plantations and in gold mines, forced into a system of labor called the encomienda that was little more than slavery. Within a single generation, warfare, famine, and disease had decimated the Taino. Their population, which may have numbered in the millions, was reduced to a fraction. The story of the Taino is the human face of the Columbian Exchange, a poignant and devastating reminder that the meeting of two worlds carried a cost that can never be forgotten. What does it mean to be the first chapter in a story of cataclysm, and how does a culture endure when its people are gone? While the Taino cultivated their peaceful ball courts, a different kind of power was moving north through the island chain. The Carib people, also known as the Kalinago, carved their identity from the open ocean. They were master mariners who had migrated from South America in great fleets of dugout canoes, and their reputation as formidable warriors preceded them. Their vessels were not just transportation, they were instruments of expansion, large enough to carry dozens of fighters and swift enough to strike without warning. They navigated by a profound knowledge of wind patterns, star paths, and the subtle signs of distant land, turning the Caribbean into their domain. Their society was organized for strength and survival. Unlike the more hierarchical Taino chiefdoms, Carib communities were often led by war chiefs, with status earned through prowess in battle and skill at sea. Men and women had distinct roles, with men focused on fishing, boat building, and raiding, while women managed agriculture, pottery, and the household. This separation was stark, and it extended to language, with men and women sometimes using different words for the same object, a linguistic echo of their South American origins. Their raids on Taino settlements were a central part of their culture, not just for acquiring resources but for capturing women and young men, whom they would often integrate into their society, a practice that ensured their population remained robust. When European sails appeared on the horizon, the Carib response was immediate and fierce. They did not submit, they fought back with a tenacity that stalled colonial expansion for generations. They understood the terrain of their scattered islands perfectly, using them as a network of hidden bases from which to launch guerrilla attacks on Spanish, French, and English settlements. They would capture European ships, adapt their technology, and turn their own weapons against them. On the island of St. Vincent, they formed a powerful alliance with shipwrecked West Africans, creating the Garifuna people, a community that carried forward their resilient spirit. Their resistance was so sustained and effective that the European powers were eventually forced to sign treaties with them, a rare acknowledgement of their sovereign power. The sheer force of their presence left a permanent mark on the map itself. The very name of the region, the Caribbean Sea, is derived from their name, a lasting tribute to the people who defined these waters through their courage and seamanship. Though their numbers were eventually devastated by disease and relentless warfare, their legacy is one of incredible resilience. They adapted their warfare, their social structures, and their very identity to withstand pressures that crushed other civilizations, proving that even in the face of overwhelming force, a people rooted in the sea could not be easily erased. How does a culture known for its fierce independence find a way to persist when the world conspires to change it? The Peruvian desert is a landscape of absolute scarcity, a place where life seems to retreat from the sun. Yet here, the Moch people saw not a wasteland but a canvas. Their civilization bloomed in a series of river valleys, each one a narrow green ribbon threading through the barren coast. These were their islands, isolated pockets of fertility where they engineered a society of staggering artistic and architectural power. Their cities were dominated by colossal adobe pyramids, the Huaca del Sol and the Huaca de la Luna. The Pyramid of the Sun was a mountain made by human hands, constructed from over 140 million mud bricks, each one stamped with a symbol of the laborer who made it. It was a statement of political control, a testament to a society that could command the work of thousands, but its twin, the Pyramid of the Moon, held the deeper secrets. This was a spiritual center, a place of ritual and sacrifice. Its walls were painted with vibrant murals of a fierce, fanged deity, and its plazas witnessed ceremonies that connected the Moch world to the realm of the gods. They did not build for eternity, as their bricks slowly melt back into the earth with every rain, but they built with a vision that has lasted for millennia. Their true genius, however, was portable. They were masters of clay, creating pottery of such expressive realism it feels like a window into their world. They crafted stirrup spout vessels that depict human faces with such individuality they seem to be portraits of actual people, capturing a smirk, a furrowed brow, or a look of serene authority. Other vessels show intricate scenes of daily life, from fishermen in their reed boats to healers tending to the sick. They even illustrated their own myths, showing a deity now known as the Decapitator, who holds a toomey knife and a severed head. This was not mere decoration, it was a three-dimensional record of their entire culture. Their skill extended from earth to fire. The Moch were unparalleled metallurgists, among the finest the ancient world ever produced. They did not just hammer gold into simple ornaments, they perfected complex techniques like soldering, gilding, and creating intricate alloys. They fashioned nose ornaments, ear spools, and ceremonial crowns of breathtaking complexity, often inlaid with turquoise and shell. A Moch lord, adorned in his full regalia of gold, silver, and copper, would have been a dazzling, almost supernatural figure, shimmering in the desert sun, his power radiating from the very metals he wore. This brilliant civilization, which flourished for over 600 years, did not fall to an invader. Its end was gradual, likely brought on by a perfect storm of environmental crises. Decades of drought, followed by catastrophic flooding from El Niño events, may have shattered their agricultural base and destabilized their political order. The pyramids were abandoned, the pottery workshops fell silent, and the knowledge of their metalworking was lost for centuries. The Moch present us with a profound question. How does a civilization so deeply attuned to its environment, so capable of capturing the human spirit in clay and metal, ultimately fall victim to the very forces of nature it sought to master? High in the Peruvian Andes, the Wari built an empire not of stone cities but of strategic strongholds. From their capital near modern-day Ayacucho, they pioneered a new model of power around 600 years after the Common Era, one that projected control across the rugged highlands. Their centers were not designed to be self-contained cities, but rather administrative nodes, islands of state authority planted along the spines of the mountains to govern the territories between them. At sites like Piquilacta, near the sacred valley of Cusco, they constructed vast, orderly compounds. These were not organic towns that grew over time, but meticulously planned grids of rectangular galleries and plazas, all enclosed within a high, imposing wall. Walking through Piquilacta would have felt like moving through a government complex, a place of bureaucracy and control where tribute was collected and imperial decrees were enforced. The entire layout was an assertion of order over a chaotic landscape, a physical manifestation of the Wari's organizational genius. This genius found its ultimate expression in the roads they built. The Wari were the first in the Andes to construct a vast, integrated network of highways, a web of stone-paved paths that connected their far-flung centers. These were not mere trails, but engineered roads with retaining walls, drainage canals, and stairways cut into sheer cliffs. This network allowed troops to march swiftly to trouble spots, enabled the movement of goods and information across immense distances, and bound the empire together into a single, functional unit. It was a logistical masterpiece that would later become the backbone of the entire Inca Empire. Their artistic signature was bold and unmistakable. Wary potters created stunning polychrome vessels, using a rich palette of colors to paint intricate geometric patterns. Their designs often featured abstracted figures like the staff god, a central deity with radiating headdresses that was shared with their Tiwanaku contemporaries. These were not just beautiful objects, they were carriers of a state-sponsored ideology, their repeating patterns and standardized symbols reinforcing a shared imperial identity across diverse conquered peoples. To feed the populations of their administrative centers, the Wari transformed the mountains themselves. They became masters of terrace agriculture, carving endless green steps into the steep Andean slopes. These terraces did more than just create flat land for planting. They prevented catastrophic erosion and created microclimates that allowed a variety of crops like potatoes and maize to thrive at different altitudes. They complemented this with sophisticated irrigation systems, channeling precious water from highland springs to their fields. This ability to harness the difficult highland environment was the true source of their power, turning barren slopes into fertile gardens that could sustain an empire. The Wari did not just rule territory, they systematized it, creating a blueprint for highland empire that would echo for centuries. When their power eventually faded around the year 1000, their administrative centers were abandoned, but their revolutionary ideas about roads, control, and agriculture did not disappear. They were inherited, perfected, and expanded upon by the next great power to rise from the mountains. How does an empire vanish, yet have its soul live on in the civilization that follows? High on the wind-swept Altiplano, where the air is thin and the sky feels immense, the Tiwanaku built a capital that defied the harshness of its environment. Their city, centered on the southern shores of Lake Titicaca, was a marvel of engineering and faith, a place where stone was made to speak. At its heart stood the Acapona, a massive, stepped platform pyramid that mirrored the surrounding mountains, a man-made mountain intended to channel the power of the earth and sky. Nearby, the Calisosea enclosure served as a precise celestial calendar, its grand gateway perfectly aligned so that the sun's rays would strike the center of its entrance on the equinoxes, marking the balance of the year with breathtaking accuracy. But the most iconic survivor of this city is the Gateway of the Sun, a single block of andesite carved with a complex and mesmerizing central figure. This is the staff god, a deity holding a vertical staff in each hand, with rays projecting from its head that are sometimes ending in condor heads or circles, while 48 smaller, winged figures run towards him in apparent reverence. This portal was not merely an entrance, it was a spiritual statement carved in stone, a depiction of a powerful cosmology that would influence Andean religion for centuries. The sheer scale of their stonework is humbling. They quarried massive blocks of sandstone and andesite from sites miles away, transporting them to the city where they were fitted together with a jeweler's precision. The stones in structures like the Calisosea are cut with such exacting angles and smooth faces that they lock together without any mortar, a technique so advanced it would later be echoed and perfected by the Inca. This was not just construction, it was a form of high art, a testament to a society that combined spiritual vision with immense technical skill. To sustain a large urban population at 12,500 feet above sea level, the Tiwanaku performed an agricultural miracle. They transformed the boggy, frost-prone shores of Lake Titicaca into a lush, productive landscape using a system of suka collas, or raised fields. These were long, rectangular planting platforms surrounded by canals of water. The water in the canals absorbed heat from the intense sun during the day, releasing it slowly throughout the cold night, creating a protective thermal blanket that prevented crops from freezing. The nutrient-rich silt dredged from the canals was used to fertilize the fields, creating a self-renewing cycle of fertility. This ingenious system allowed them to grow vast quantities of potatoes, quinoa, and other crops, supporting a population that may have reached into the tens of thousands. Their influence was not confined to their capital. Tiwanaku became a pilgrimage center, a holy city whose religious ideas and artistic styles spread across the southern Andes, found in the highlands of Bolivia, Peru, and Chile. Their distinctive pottery, with its elegant black on-red geometric designs and fearsome representations of puma and condor deities, became a marker of a vast sphere of cultural interaction. They were the first true empire in the high Andes, a unifying force whose ideology connected distant peoples. Then, around the year 1000, this powerful civilization began to falter. The city was gradually abandoned, its grand structures left to the wind. The leading theory points to a catastrophic, centuries-long drought that caused Lake Titicaca to recede. As the water level dropped, the intricate system of succocolors failed, the protective canals drying up and the microclimate they sustained collapsing. The ecological foundation of their empire crumbled, leading to famine, social unrest, and the eventual dissolution of their political and religious authority. The legacy of Tiwanaku is one of brilliant adaptation and profound fragility. They reached a peak of Andean civilization that would not be seen again for centuries, yet their story is a powerful reminder that even the most ingenious societies are ultimately dependent on the delicate balance of their environment. What does it mean to build a civilization that can move mountains of stone, yet cannot survive when the rains simply fail to come? High in the misty cloud forests of northeastern Peru, an island in the sky nurtured a civilization of warriors and builders. The Chachapoya people carved their world from a realm of eternal green, a place so remote and enveloped in fog that they became known as the warriors of the clouds. Their greatest testament is the citadel of Cuelap, a fortress city that rivals the more famous Machu Picchu in scale and grandeur. Perched on a mountain ridge 3,000 meters above sea level, its approach is guarded by a massive stone wall, 20 meters tall in places, that snakes for nearly 600 meters. Passing through its narrow, funnel-shaped entrance feels like stepping into a myth, a gateway designed to be defended by a mere handful of warriors against an army. Inside, the ruins of over 400 circular houses, their foundations adorned with intricate zigzag and rhomboid friezes, spill across the mountaintop. These were not the square buildings of the Inca, but unique round structures that echoed the contours of their forest home. Walking through Cuelap is to walk through a ghost city in the clouds, where the air is thick with the moisture of the forest and the silence of a lost people. For their dead, the Chachapoya chose even more dramatic resting places. They constructed Puran machas, towering sarcophagi shaped like stylized human figures, and placed them high on sheer cliff faces. These solitary sentinels, often arranged in small groups, were designed to watch over the valleys for eternity, their bodies safely out of reach from predators and enemies. Inside these clay cocoons, the deceased were placed in the fetal position, accompanied by grave goods and wrapped into elaborate mummy bundles. The process of creating these mummies was a sacred art, a way of preserving the individual's presence and spiritual power within the community. Their defiance did not end with death. When the expanding Inca Empire finally reached their cloud-shrouded kingdom, the Chachapoya fought with a legendary ferocity. Despite being ultimately conquered, they never truly submitted. They rebelled repeatedly against their Inca overlords, so much so that when Francisco Pizarro and his Spanish conquistadors arrived, the Chachapoya saw a chance for liberation. They allied with the Spanish, hoping to overthrow their Inca rulers, a decision that speaks to the depth of their desire for freedom. Yet this alliance was a pact with a different devil. The Old World diseases the Spanish brought, combined with the forced relocations and cultural pressures of a new colonial order, ultimately unraveled the fabric of Chachapoya society. Their unique language faded, their distinctive architectural style was abandoned, and their identity was slowly absorbed into the broader tapestry of the Andes. The warriors of the clouds, who built their fortresses to touch the sky and placed their ancestors among the condors, ultimately dissolved into the very mists that gave them their name. What does it take for a culture to stand so defiantly against an empire, only to vanish in the chaotic aftermath of a world it helped to bring down? 35 island stories weave a single, powerful narrative about the human spirit. From the Minoan thalassocracy to the Polynesian star navigators, a common thread emerges: the profound power of isolation. When a community is surrounded by water, its choices become intensely focused. There is no easy land to expand into, no simple escape from internal problems. This pressure cooker environment forced innovation. The Maltese built the world's first freestanding temples without any outside blueprint. The Rapa Nui moved 80-ton statues with nothing but rope, logs, and sheer human ingenuity. The ancient Cypriots turned a single metal into an international currency. Isolation did not mean ignorance, it meant a unique path, a cultural signature forged in solitude. This is the central paradox of the island. For some, it became a prison, a limited space where resources could be exhausted and societies could turn inward and collapse, as the evidence on Easter Island so hauntingly suggests. Yet for others, the very same sea that imprisoned them became their greatest sanctuary. The Talaiotic culture of Minorca flourished for over 1,000 years, protected by the waves that kept invading armies at bay. The Jomon of Japan sustained a delicate balance with their environment for 14,000 years, largely free from the disruptive migrations that reshaped the mainland. The island was a protective bubble, allowing traditions, languages, and spiritual beliefs to develop in ways that would have been impossible on a connected continent. But the most brilliant civilizations never saw the ocean as a wall. They saw it as a highway. The sea was not a barrier to their world, it was the very center of it. Mastery of shipbuilding and navigation transformed isolation into connection. The Phoenicians strung their trading posts across the Mediterranean like pearls on a necklace. The Lapita people used the stars to populate an ocean 1/3 of the Earth's surface. The kingdom of Ryukyu built its entire identity on being the essential bridge between China and Japan. Their maritime skill allowed them to create networks of influence that were more fluid and often more resilient than land-based empires. They traded not just goods but genes, ideas, and gods. The sweet potato from South America reached Polynesia. The alphabet from the Levant gave voice to Greece. Buddhism sailed from India to illuminate Sri Lanka. These island civilizations were the great catalysts of the ancient world, the restless, seafaring nodes in a global network that was far more interconnected than we often imagine. Their legacy is a testament to a fundamental truth that human creativity, when bounded by the sea, does not shrink. It concentrates, it specializes, and then it sets sail, forever changing the shores it touches. From the sun-drenched courtyards of Minoan palaces to the silent, staring moai of Easter Island, our journey is complete. We have sailed across millennia and vast oceans to uncover the stories of 35 ancient civilizations that not only survived on islands but thrived there. Their legacies are not just etched in stone, pottery, and epic myth, but in the very blueprint of human ingenuity. These societies were masterpieces of adaptation, proving that isolation is not a sentence to obscurity, but a catalyst for unique and powerful forms of culture. They were not isolated backwaters forgotten by time. They were dynamic, vibrant centers of commerce, spiritual belief, and breathtaking innovation. Their stories challenge our very definition of a civilization center, showing us that the heart of the ancient world often beats strongest on the most remote shores. So now we turn the story over to you. Which of these island civilizations captured your imagination the most? Was it the maritime empire of the Tongan kings, the mysterious script of the Minoans, or the colossal ambition of the Rapa Nui people? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the mysteries of our shared past, be sure to subscribe for more journeys through time. Until next time, keep exploring.